we plan to have time, you know, to have a, you know, it was also depending on what was coming up from, you know, the meeting. So we discussed yesterday of a process to be able to structure the discussion. And so that's what I want to show you now before we go into the closing. So basically, we're asking you to do something this morning, you know, in parallel to the closing. And it's very easy. We would like you to put on a paper an idea that you have for a topic that we could work on this afternoon. Something, you know, that you are not doing yourself already. Something that you think we can do together, either to amplify the work that is done, to launch an offensive action, or to build community action. So you write your idea on a piece of paper, and there is a red bag here hanging on the mic. Gaelle is in charge of the red bag. And so we will gather all the ideas. Then at lunchtime, we will have a small team working on sorting and pooling the ideas. And then at the very beginning of the civil society strategy session, we will have a quick voting process to identify the 4 most popular ideas. Okay, so thanks for, you know, just take 1 minute at some point and fill a paper. You can take it from your notebook and put it in the bag. Okay, thank you. So this said, we're gonna move to the closing ceremony. Okay, thanks. So you've seen the topic of the discussion that we are going to have. You know, it's a radical agenda, question mark. We also discussed how we were going to have this closing ceremony during the conference, the summit, and it was really interesting. We had a lot of speakers, a lot of presentation, lots of information. It's really good because it was really a way to show exciting things are going on the ground. But we also thought it would be really good to try to make sure that during the closing ceremony we can have actually a, you know, real and dense conversation. In order to do that, we asked our 6 speakers, sorry, if they could, so a little change in the format, you know, if they could be very brief. So instead of really giving a, you know, full presentation, if they could give a quick, short speech with 1, 2, 3 very strong ideas that they would like to share with you and that we can discuss, you know, when, you know, trying to answer that question. Can we think of a radical agenda? So that's what we're going to do. So also in order to favor discussion, we will not wait until all the speakers have spoken. We will have 2 speakers and then some discussion, and then 2 speakers and some discussion, and then, you know, more general debate at the end. So Pauline is in charge to take note of the big ideas the speakers are sharing with us, so that when we, during the last part of this session, when we have the general discussion, we can still, you know, see on the screen and have in mind the various ideas that people have been sharing with us. So we're going to start with Jorge. I give you the floor. Thank you. So basically you have 2-3 minutes.
A very brief presentation. Where is... No, it's... So my idea is to have some key messages and key words or ideas that we would discuss and move further. First of all, lessons learned and affordability. I think affordability is important for us, not only what we have learned with HIV/AIDS and with ARVs, and we have now first line and second line affordable, third line not yet, but we need to move on hepatitis C and other in cancer and affordability. And we have to revisit the UN Secretary General High-Level Panel with the 24 recommendations and the different roles that each UN organizations, governments, civil society can implement. We have to move forward on the high-level panel and include the annexes that we had several points besides the general format of the high-level panel. And where are we going? We need to prepare and plan a patent-free future. I think we have to be radical. And we have to address the issue of middle-income countries, because the funding for countries is for low-income countries mostly, and to move from income to burden of diseases. Address a multi-stakeholder collaboration initiative. The linkage is very important. We must move on that. Halting evergreening, enhance South-South cooperation, and capacity building. And I have two special issues that I have repeated in my talks. Unlock the BRICS universal access to TB first line, and the effectively automatic compulsory licenses for essential medicine that was submitted by the International Law Association, of which Ellen Toin here is one of the proposers, the proponents. And this is absolutely within the TRIPS framework now. Some burning issues is, do we need palliative or we want radical ideas? How can we address access to medicine on a positive agenda? And we need to have a human rights approach. Is it fair to have the same system for low, middle, and income countries? Since the CIPR, the Commission on Intellectual Property Rights of the UK, before the CIPR, this has been raised. Affordability, how to data exclusivity, and we need to recognize that the current system is broken. And we have to have empowerment of civil society organizations, funding, advocacy, but we need a very strong communication policy to be able to move forward and to sensibilize governments and other organizations. The database on TRIPS flexibilities that Ellen Toin mentioned yesterday, because we have to implement not only compulsory license, but all the TRIPS flexibilities. And can we have a regional approach instead of each country having its own compulsory license or others? I think we have to discuss that. It was discussed in the past with influenza and oseltamivir. Hepatitis C is a must now. Vaccines, and we have other examples. And two questions, and Oksana yesterday brought us this Prime Minister Indira Gandhi talk at the World Health Assembly in '82. The idea of a better ordered world is one in which medical discoveries will be free of patents and there will be no profiteering from life and death. And I ask if is a balance between innovation and access to medicine possible within this current system? If so, how? And what next? Access as a right, really, or will we continue to discuss utopia? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, German, if you can be next. I'm not presenting the people you already know.
Good morning. As Gaelle announced, I am not going to make any presentation. It's a short intervention. I have basically, do you have my presentation? My intervention. I am going to, I have three slides. One is explaining what is for me a radical agenda. The name of the session is a radical agenda, so I am going to give some characteristic what is a radical agenda for me in this environment. The second slide, I am going to say, in my opinion, what is the situation of the access to medicines movement globally, where we are, what is the environment, to see if we are going to talk about radical agenda, a radical agenda for what? So I am going to say where, in my opinion, is the situation. And the third slide is some suggestions what can be the elements of this radical agenda. So let's go. A radical agenda for me, it will be to have a target. And for me, my suggestion is to target the WHO new administration. It's a good opportunity that we are starting a new phase in WHO, So let's target, in my opinion, my suggestion is a radical agenda. I will target WHO new administration. The second characteristic of the radical agenda will be to be constructive, innovative, and the long-term visions. The third will be build and lead NGOs' common strategy to interact with WHO. And the fourth one, that is, in my opinion, the most important one, is to focus on what is the essential for access to medicines. You know, the access to medicine, the debate or issue started in '78 with Almata, where essential medicines were a component. After the Department of Essential Medicine in WHO took more or less 10 years to formulate one, in my opinion, the most important document published by WHO in the area of medicines, together with the essential drug model list, was the guidelines to formulate a national drug policy. At one point, 10 years ago, WHO was advocating that national drug policy was an essential component of the health system, of health policy of the country. So now, if you can imagine the national drug policy like a body, now we have a monster. It's not a body anymore, because in the classical components of the national drug policy, you have the selection, that was the list, the model list was the head. And you have the rational use, that was an arm, and you have the quality, and you have, and so on, the whole components of the national drug policy. Now, you have, for example, the one hand that was supposed to be the contrafeit. We have been 4 years debating for trafit. So the hand of this body became bigger than a leg. And the same thing happened, for example, with intellectual property. Intellectual property is supposed to be a very, very important issue in the national report, was the eyes, for example. But now the eyes are bigger than the head. So we are dealing with a monster. So I suggest you to come back and to go to the essentials. The second slide, this is the legacy of Margaret Chan. The organization is facing three dilemmas. The dilemma between public or private. Is NGO a public international agency, or is a PPP is a big MSF, big NGO? The dilemma between the voluntary resolution and binding instruments, and the dilemma between a normative agency or humanitarian one. And now the elements. The elements, and this is the last slide, the elements is, first, I will say to reinforce and promote the use of essential medicines, the drug selection. The drug selection should be, and this is very, very related with IP, because there are thousands and thousands of patents that are not totally useless in terms of public health. So that the first thing is to go to insist in drug selection. The second thing George mentioned is to use the human rights concept. And only 2 of you, during these 3 days, if I am not wrong, mentioned the treaty, the binding treaty being negotiated already since 2 years in the Council of Human Rights. You have to be present there to lobby and to make sure, because the binding instrument is for transnational corporations. The pharmaceutical industry is in the top of this transnational corporation. If we go through the human rights way, that will be interesting. And that is also IP, because in the case of Gilead, for example, I say in public already once, and I repeat here, Gilead science, because they are violating human rights. So we have to accuse them as a violation, and you don't have to wait years and years in order to have compulsory license. You say it's a violation, and you withdraw the license. The third thing is the enforcement tools for clinical trials. We have to talk. We cannot continue to recommend things for. You have to enforce norms and rules. And finally, the ethical criteria. That is a disaster. I think that will be one element of the radical agenda. And finally, to clarify the situation with the generic of biological products. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We know it's really not easy for the speakers. They're under a lot of pressure to be quick, but it's also so that we can discuss. So I propose now that we start to have a first, round of reactions. So what's your take on the suggestion that were just made? How do you interpret this idea of radicality? What does it mean for you? Is this a vision? Is this some action we need to undertake quickly? The floor is yours. People have been listening so much over the past few days that now they're in a listening mode.
Bonjour. J'essaierai un petit peu de réagir à ce qui a été dit, surtout concernant la question des droits humains. Je pense que j'essaie un petit peu de réagir sur la question des droits humains. En tant que défenseur de l'accès aux médicaments, je pense qu'en 2004 ou bien en 2005, le Haut Commissariat des droits humains à Genève, ils ont publié un document intitulé les indicateurs des droits humains, c'est-à-dire comment faire pour mesurer n'importe quel droit. Donc, je pense qu'on est obligé à faire un grand effort sur la question d'accès aux médicaments, comment ce droit-là peut être mesurable. Parce que c'est vrai, on peut parler beaucoup de droits humains, mais comment les mesurer et pour voir comment les pays se développent ou bien quels sont les efforts fournis par les pays pour arriver à que les citoyens puissent bénéficier d'accès aux médicaments d'une manière claire et selon les besoins de la population, pour sortir un petit peu de ces questions-là, que la question des droits humains, c'est des génériques ou bien ce sont des termes très généraux. Ça, c'est le premier point. Le deuxième point, je pense qu'on a l'occasion des ODD, c'est-à-dire des objectifs de développement durable, mais même dans ces ODD, la question des droits humains n'est pas très claire. Donc, on doit faire un effort pour que, au sein des ODD, la question des droits humains soit très, très, très claire, avec des indicateurs mesurables au fur et à mesure du temps. Merci.
Merci.
My question is to German Velasquez about the radical agenda and the new targets, WHO new administration. Do you think it's something possible, or is not to be an utopia?
Okay. Maybe we take a couple more reactions and then we give back the floor to the first two speakers.
Hello,
Please,
morning. I speak in Thai. อยากจะบอกว่า Hello, I speak in Thai. It's okay?
My Thai is not totally, and also the translation is so good. I wouldn't want to miss it.
I need to thank for this conference. It's compare for my translate to communicate with you. I think it's very important for me to speak Thai with you. Okay? อยากจะบอกว่าที่ทำงานอยู่ทุกวันนี้เนี่ยเป็นเพราะว่ามีคำพูดอยู่คำหนึ่งของเพื่อนผู้ติดเชื้อในเมืองไทยที่เขาพูดว่าถ้าพวกเราไม่ทำอย่างที่พวกเรากำลังทำอยู่ในห้องนี้ถ้าเราไม่สู้เรื่องของทรัพย์สินทางปัญญาตอนนี้เนี่ยไม่อย่างนั้นเนี่ยพวกเขาตายหมดแล้วอยากจะบอกว่าอันนี้คือความสำคัญมากของการที่พวกเรายังคงสู้กันอยู่ในเรื่องของทรัพย์สินทางปัญญาเพราะว่าทรัพย์สินทางปัญญามันทำให้ยาแพงมันทำให้คนไม่ได้ยามันเป็นสาเหตุหลักที่ทำให้คนที่ติดเชื้อ HIV ตายสิ่งที่พวกเรากำลังทำอยู่ตอนนี้คือหยุดการตายโดยการทำลายระบบทรัพย์สินทางปัญญาเราต้องชูเจเนริกเราต้องคัดค้านคำขอซึ่งไม่ได้คุณภาพเราต้องสู้เรื่อง evergreening ผมคิดว่าทั้งหมดที่พวกเรากำลังทำอยู่นี้มีความสำคัญมากและที่สำคัญไปกว่านั้นก็คือ ความเป็นพี่เป็นน้องของพวกเราในห้องนี้ทำให้เรามีพลังและเราก็จะสู้เรื่องนี้ต่อไปด้วยกันครับขอบคุณครับ
Should I? So over the course of the couple days, I feel like we've talked a fair bit about sort of radical versus reform agendas and sort of how radical we want to be. I think about it a somewhat different way, which is what is going politically to build the movement and build our power collectively. And when we're making campaign decisions, that's often what we think. So the difference is, for example, right now in the United States, we're working on some relatively modest pieces of legislation because they've got a good shot at succeeding and growing the movement while we're at it. We can buy in some of the political leadership to get toward bigger reforms later. If we're working on some campaigns in the South, like we might want a full law reform in a given country to entirely replace the system, but we'll work on a particular compulsory license campaign because it's something that people in the treatment community can identify with as a priority, and it helps build our power. In other words, every question I want to ask is, with everything we plan strategically, how do we build our power? What is going to be most successful in bringing a movement together, even if in some cases those might be more modest ideas in order to build a coalition. So just thinking not so much about, because I think most of us want to see a very different system in the future. Most of us have a radical agenda, but there are different strategic decisions to make in the moment about how we aggregate the necessary power and win victories. In many of our countries, in order to buy in the leadership, we have to prove that we can beat pharma, right? We have to show people that it's okay to stand up to pharma, and so we have to take those victories that clearly defeat pharma where we can find them and build toward the bigger agenda over time.
Okay. Before we move to the next speaker, so I want to ask German and Jorge if they want to respond or react to what people just said. German, if you want to answer on WHO. The mic, please.
Was if try to deal with WHO, put it WHO as a target is in Ethiopia. I don't think so. I mean, we are many of you, we are from developing countries, and the people from the north are very, 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 very committed with the developing countries' problems. For the first time in 70 years, there is a Director General from Africa. Let's give him some credit and try to help him. It's for that that I say to interact with WHO with a constructive and positive agenda. There is several signs. He already mentioned that the high-level panel recommendations he was going to assume and to integrate with the work of WHO. So I will give some credit, and I will be optimistic that we can deal to help him, because what he's receiving from Margaret Sack is a organization that is collapsing. So let's help him to redress rebuild the organization. Thank you.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Germán, and I think if we have Tedros as a DG, and we have also in the field of medicines, Mariangela from Brazil, that she's a very committed person with human rights when she worked at UNAIDS, I think we have to give the credit and we have to help them to be able to move forward. But I think that one issue that we need to know very clearly is what is WHO's role and what is civil society roles, government's roles, and we have to move that agenda on all the actors that we have there. I think we need to strengthen WHO with the people that are there because they are reliable persons, and we hope that they will be able to move the organization forward.
Michele, if you are ready, I would like to give you the floor. So Michele Childs, who you didn't hear already, is head of policy advocacy at Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative, DNDI. Michele has an extensive experience in proposing and advocating for solutions to access and innovation barriers faced by developing countries and health providers. Until March 2013, Michele was Director of Policy Advocacy at the MSF campaign. And she has worked for leading consumer, health, and knowledge right organization and public authorities. And as a member of a number of NGOs and advisory boards, public advisory boards. So you have a little bit more time than the two others because you haven't had the chance already to take the floor, please.
Thanks, and I'd like to thank ITPC for inviting DNDI here. What I thought might be useful is to draw on some of the lessons that DNDI has learned as it's instigated its work, and to come up with two examples of areas where I think we could take practical steps to make real changes for patients. So this is, I think, to encourage people about the benefits of meeting together in rooms like this. If we look at the origins of DNDI, it first of all came out from a first meeting to talk about the lack of research and development for neglected diseases. And MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, was one of the co-organizers of that. And it got together academics, people living with neglected diseases and institutions. And basically what MSF did was it used some of the money from the Nobel Prize to set up a working group to try and come up with practical solutions to some of these problems. And one of those solutions was to set up a PDP, not-for-profit, to focus on patient outcomes for neglected diseases. It was also recognized that you needed public leadership and that it needed to be based in the South. And it's one of the few institutions where on the board we have agencies from the South, from Kenya, from India, from Brazil, from Malaysia, as well as from France and observers from the WHO. I think it's also important to point out that this was driven by some of the frustration that we see here, that we talked a lot about access, but the main system for incentivizing research and development doesn't just create access problems, it also drives research into the areas of highest profit, not the greatest need. And so MSF was saying that we wanted not just to deal with I say we, because I was used to work for them, what they said was that you didn't just need to tackle high-priced medicines, but it was recognized that you would need new medicines. And also that you would need a variety of people, governments, civil society, industry, to work together to solve this problem. But you didn't want charity, you wanted change. So DNDI was set up as really an experiment in innovation and access, not just in what it did, which was to focus on the diseases for neglected populations, but also how it did it, to try and see if you could do a different way, which was based on open knowledge, affordable treatments, and to ensure that you would develop drugs as public goods, and they'd be developed from the start for the places and the people that needed them. And it would focus on strengthening capacity. So how has this experiment gone? It's basically delivered 7 treatments, which are easy to use, affordable, and are patent-free. And we're also working on new chemical entities. But I think it's important to note that this cannot be the only solution. What we've learned is that alternatives are possible, which is important for policymakers, so change is possible with real results. But you cannot rely on ad hoc solutions. What we need is a sustainable solution of new tools. What we've also learned is that DNDI's success is only possible through innovative partnerships. That's partly because DNDI is a virtual R&D organization and it has to work with a number of other partners. But I think it's important that that partnership has only worked because there are a common set of rules. We've agreed together with the partners what we want to achieve. And it's also important to note that those partners are a variety of people. We've tended in this meeting to talk about the pharmaceutical industry as if it's a monolith. Actually, when you're talking about research and development, there are different actors, be they research institutes, be they other PDPs, and it can be big pharmaceutical companies, biotechs, and generics. And that's important because when you talk about solutions, you have to talk about who you're trying to target and what do they need in order to be able to deliver those solutions. We also had a debate, which I think George mentioned on the first plenary, that's been going on in the WHO to be talking about how we can move research and development to be patient-focused. We've had various reports, and we've also had, at the highest level, all countries have signed on in the UN Political Declaration on AMR to a set of guiding principles which is supposed to steer biomedical research and development into being patient-centered and needs-based. And it says a couple of important things which I think we need to build on. Firstly, that you need to ensure a public return on public investment. We pay for research and development either through high prices or for actually carrying out the basic research. That the cost of research and development should be delinked. That further future R&D investments should be based on these key principles of affordability, effectiveness, efficiency and equity. All of your governments have signed up to this. But how do you turn paper commitments into real ones? And I think wanted to suggest some progressive steps to ensure a public health approach to research and development. First of all, to help develop and support alternative approaches for R&D. We have a number of thought leaders in this room, like James Love, who've done a huge amount of work looking at alternative approaches. DNDI itself, with the WHO, is trying to incubate a new approach to antimicrobial resistance called GARD-P. There are other suggestions that MSF and other people in the room have put forward. It was also, civil society came together as part of the response to the high-level panel with a whole series of suggestions for access and research and development. Those proposals should be revisited. It's also helpful for the WHO and for members of civil society to develop a list of essential health technologies and target product profiles. What is it that you want to see? What is it that you need? What type of products do you need? And then the second idea is to put the globally agreed principles into practice. There's been a lot of discussions about an R&D treaty. We already have an R&D treaty. It's called the TRIPS Agreement. What we want to move to is an agreement that actually focuses on patient needs. In the short term, you could do that by developing a code of principles for research and development that would apply to all public funding. And in the medium term, we really need to look at how we can move towards an overarching framework for all areas of public health importance that apply these principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michele. I'm asking now Babalwa Malgas to take the floor, please. Babalwa has a law degree from the University of Western Cape and a postgraduate degree in labor law from the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. She is currently doing a course at the Harvard Kennedy School of Education in Leadership, Organizing and Action. She's a cancer survivor since 2011, even though she did not have access to trastuzumab because of IP barriers. Please.
Morning, everyone. Thank again Morocco for this opportunity. Whilst other people were worried about visas and stuff, I was worried about my fake breast, whether at the airport it won't cause any chaos. I pictured myself being searched and thinking that those small granules inside it are drugs or something. It's just on a light note. The issue of IP, it has been discussed extensively in the past 2 days. IP monopoly is a sad thing. It grants authority to the few, and they get to make decisions on behalf of life issues concerning many. And it's a sad thing because if you infringe, if you commit a crime, it's called the infringement of the IP, and there's a civil court to decide on the issue. But if many people die because of these IP laws, the crime does not, you cannot tell what sort of a crime it is. I come from a small town in South Africa. It's a township called Mdantsane, as you've heard now, I'm not looking for entitlement. I've worked very hard for myself. Then it was so unfortunate that in 2011, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was on the prime of my career. I had left a government job, thinking that I'm creating an opportunity for the younger generation than me, so that I can actually open some fair economic ground by opening my own law firm. Unfortunately, cancer hit me. For me, it meant that I have to strategize. I can't, because I was opening a law firm, I couldn't have the luxuries of a medical aid that I had whilst I was in a government position. Moreover, I had 2 children to look after at the time. The other one was 1, the other one was 5. So this is how IP actually have the consequences of affecting political as well as social freedom. I won't dwell on that because it has been discussed extensively, but I'll give you a clear view of patients. When that happened, first of all, I had to be strong for my children. And I decided to take the treatment of chemo. I had hope that cancer can be cured. And I still have a chance to raise my children and continue with my life. In the middle of everything, thank you. In the middle of everything, was thinking that, yeah, Babalwa is big. I started saying, really, cancer can be cured. This is true. As a result, I told myself, you know what? I will prove that I only had cancer and it can be cured and I'm not cancer. I took that higher diploma degree with the Metropolitan University and I passed it with a distinction. The reason that I'm telling you that is that I didn't know that there was something that was going to shock me. I had a medical aid and I was told that I cannot get trastuzumab. It is too expensive. The medical aid told me. As an attorney, the first thing that I thought about is that, yeah, I'll fight for my rights. I know how to do it. I started doing a research. I started Googling issues. Then I was met with IP. And I looked at it and said, yo, this battle is too difficult for me even as an attorney. Because I have cancer to look for. I still need to attend treatment. I know court cases. I know the expenses. I'm struggling as it is because I have to pay for the treatment of cancer. This one, I'm not going to win because I'll be dealing with big companies, big issues. And I had to, unfortunately, choose whether I want depression and I want to move on. This is how these IP monopolies are affecting us. In the middle of my struggle, fighting with cancer, I ran to a public hospital. I'm coming from a private hospital. I'm an educated person. I am the hope of my township. If you don't know what that means, to us it means everyone is looking at that Malgas girl saying she can make it for us. And now here she is having to come back and tell other cancer patients that actually I cannot even fight for the treatment that we cannot access, even though the South African Constitution we have equal rights to health. So what I'm trying to say, the person that you are seeing in that picture is my neighbor, my childhood friend, my everything, my sister. At some time, she came to me. She told me that she was diagnosed with HER2-positive breast cancer. She was willing to fight. She attended all her treatments. Then she was hit with the bad news also that she cannot access trastuzumab. It's one of the drugs that she also needs, not only to survive, but to give her hope. She was a strong woman. So she came and asked me, how did you survive? Did you get it? As hurt I was happy to tell her that I also didn't have it because I wanted her to have hope, and she did. Then she asked me, what can I do to help in this struggle? I told her about the Cancer Alliance group that I've met through people living with cancer, because that's what you do when you look for answers. You look for other people that have the same problems as you. I told her about the group. She said, you know what? Do whatever. Sometimes people think that we are being used. Sometimes we are not. We fight for what we think is right and the only way we know how. So she joined the struggle of advocates for breast cancer. Unfortunately, last year, she lost it. She lost the struggle to cancer. And I was left behind to answer to his children. They came to me and asked, Aunt, what did you do differently that made you leave and our mom die? I felt guilty. I felt it was my fault. I felt I had defrauded them of something. But unfortunately, it was the IP monopoly. In conclusion, for other people, it's a different struggle. For us, it's a real struggle. Which court can we use to fight and win this battle?
Thank you, Babalwa. You're asking a very difficult question, but I mean, we're here to try to answer it. So I don't know if somebody in the room wants to take the floor. What people have been talking about here is, you know, how do we resist the bad laws, bad rules we're confronted to? How do we rebuild, you know, WHO, the idea of public return for public investment, the idea of public interest? How do we come up with proposals of, you know, different ways of living together and doing things? What are our alternatives so that we're not just resisting and fighting back, but also, you know, creating something better for us all together? We still have two other speakers, but if anybody wants to contribute, please do.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering whether something we can think about is a sort of declaration on access to medicines and human rights that clearly connects the link, connects how monopolies violate those human rights. So a declaration of principle and a declaration beyond that of policy, of what our vision is. If we have a question of radical and reform, at least a common agreement on where we want to go, one that we can use, but also that we can hold others accountable to.
Thank you. I might not have all the answers, but all what I can say is, comrade, let us not mourn, let us mobilize. Let us destabilize the system. Let us make sure that when we go back to our communities, we don't say this is a mental health care patient, this is a TB patient. Let's mobilize all public health care users. We hold the power. We vote for politicians to go to parliament. Let's reclaim back that power. Come 2019 in South Africa, we are going to elections. How do we make sure in South Africa and elsewhere that we influence the election manifestos of all political parties? We call them and engage them before they draft their manifestos. How do we make sure that we go to Geneva and fight against all the evil laws that continues to discriminate us, which at the end of the day makes people who are coming from poor countries to die out of unnecessary deaths? So I'm trying to say, let us not mourn, let us mobilize, let us fight back, let us resist, let us destabilize the system until it goes down to on its knees. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Verano first, please.
No, I think that what our colleague from South Africa addressed is how important it is in our agenda to be very clear that it is very important to include together with, we would call patients, but I prefer to say citizenships affected by diseases, living with diseases, and to mobilize them. This is something that must be very clear in our work. We have lots of good successes, at least in Brazil, and I think that's in South Africa as well, how important it is to keep it very clear in the agenda. So we forgot that some years ago we had this JIPA principle, and it is getting forgotten everywhere. So I think it's time. It's part of our fight, and to stress that. Always together with, I don't like to say patients, but to treat this idea of citizenship. Access to medicines is access to right. This is very clear. It's not charity, it's not reparation, it's right. So, but you must do that together with people, with affected people.
Yeah.
No, so first, thank you for both speeches. I think we all agree that this system is killing people and will keep killing people unless we reduce the power of those that create this system. So I think we all agree also that our main victories were when we fight all together against the cases that pharma companies brought against India, South Africa. That were the moments of big mobilization, big solidarity. But it's time for us to accuse them, to bring them to the courts ourselves, to accuse them as criminals, you know, like put them to respond for violations, for deaths. So I don't know where we can find those international courts, but we have also the experience of people's tribunals. You know, we can work all together on bringing all these accusations together and doing them to respond for the first time to civil society on what they have been doing and all the people they killed over the years. So we can have this as a common agenda, accuse them and start to reduce their power by putting them in the other side, because we are normally fighting back their cases, but we have all the arguments to initiate an international case against pharma companies, and we can think about that. And my second comment is more about what Michele was saying, that I think that we need to face a paradox, because I think if we are to be serious about what we want to achieve, our main goal, we need to fight for a world where we are not needed anymore. We, IP activists, we need to fight for a world where this is not a problem anymore. So to do that, I think we should follow Indira Gandhi's message that everybody puts on the screen. Medical technology is free of patents. That's the vision we must have. The way we're going to achieve it, there are many ideas, but I think it's not only a matter of new innovation models or new principles. We need to create new laws, new utopias. You know, medicines as common goods, things that are beyond market. So we need to, I know this doesn't exist, It's distant, but we need to always dream with the impossible to achieve whatever we want. So just two things. Accuse companies, we need to start to do that, and we need to have medicines as common goods as a main goal that will unite us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before we give the floor to more people, I would like to ask the two last speakers to speak. So Loon, if you could, either go here or stay where you are as you want.
That's too many. Yeah, thank you. As my sister has said, and comrades from Africa and comrades from Brazil has said, and the last 2 days we hear that the system, the radical agenda to me is that the system is fucked. So we need to fuck the system. Clearly, she demonstrated that the system is fucked. So we need to fuck the system. That is the radical agenda. Because the system, the objective is not met. Innovation is not increased, access is not increased. So what are we trying to do again and again? The system is like a totally worn out vehicle tire. You fix one and you go a little bit and it gets punctured again and you fix again. In the name of flexibilities, you fix again. You drive a little bit, it gets punctured again. You give one flexibilities, you fix again, it gets punctured again. The system, this is repeated again and again. So the system, the problem of this system is evergreen. Evergreening problem we have the system. So we need to do away with this system. And this can be changed until and unless we put in our head that the system is fucked and this needs to be, no new innovative idea or alternative idea will come. Because as we are trying to do with this system. So let's put away with this system, then only then in our head we can find a new innovative or alternative idea. So nothing, we are here not to do big or here not to do small. What I want to tell you before we go back is, the translation is this time. Let's do what we can. That's all I want to ask before we go back is, we are here to do what we can. Otherwise, if we, tomorrow, our children and the next generation and history will judge us by not doing what we can. So everyone, some are lawyers, some are scientists, some are community people who just like an empty gong like me, who just talk and burst. But everyone has a role, and we have to do what we can. That's it. Very simple. The problem is when we don't do what we can. That's where the problem is. So let's do what we can. And what we can is that we know that the system is fucked. And we have to fuck the system. So there is alternative system. This is a man-made system. So there could be another way to save life. So all this time we talk about the people are worried about patent term extension. But for us is patient life extension. This is what our work is. Thank you.
Well, good morning. A lot of things have been said, and I think I am going maybe to build on and maybe repeat some of the suggestions. But before I just want to to remind ourselves that maybe we have been thinking with a kind of austerity state of mind during the past years because we have been losing. And yesterday, I think our colleague from Kazakhstan has said that the TRIPS flexibility was a kind of bone for a dog, and we have been this bone and we have been playing with it, and the real problem was TRIPS. And I think the Moroccan former minister also said that we are spending our time today fighting TRIPS plus, while it is TRIPS that needs to be destroyed, and we need to fight against TRIPS and not TRIPS plus. So I think we need to remind ourselves that we were saying by the past no TRIPS, and now we are saying TRIPS only. And I think there have been a lot of initiatives, reports, declarations that we have been critical, and I think we cannot come up with something lower than that. If the report of the HIV Commission and the law says that we need a moratorium on TRIPS and we need to change the system, I think as activists we cannot ask or come with something lower than that. So I think there should be, as Felipe has said, no patents on medical products. It's really a big challenge because I found myself very often in meetings in Geneva or whatever, and we say, well, even if this is my agenda, am I going to be credible if in this meeting say no to patents? So I play with the bone like a dog and try to defend as much as I can the TRIPS flexibilities. Thinking about this, how we are going to achieve this big agenda, should we shift forum? Shifting forum, this is what they did. When they were losing somewhere, they go to another place. And they went to WTO, while IP is not about, WTO is about competition, is about free circulation of goods, it's not about monopolies. And they succeeded to shift there. Now we are shifting to FTAs, and they are shifting. So should we shift? I think we should. Where, I don't know. This is a question that I am asking here. I think we should make them accountable, not only pharma, organizations as well, WTO, governments, negotiators, if we need to go to the level of individuals. We need to make them accountable everywhere where this is possible. Human Rights Council, Human Rights Courts, or whatever, globally, regionally, nationally. And maybe talking about targets, and I totally agree with Herman, I think WHO is really a key target. I think there are opportunities now, yes, with the new leadership, either Tedros or Marianne Michele, who is really a good ally. And maybe we can start with targeting the triangular treaty with WHO, WIPO, and WTO as a target, and make them accountable for human rights violations. I think we need a mass campaign where in whatever, I don't know, we need to target human rights bodies or courts or whatever, nationally or regionally or globally, or all of them together, and ask them to be accountable for these human rights violations. A global day against or targeting WHO. We have WHO offices in every country. We have headquarters in Geneva. We've done this a lot, targeting pharmaceutical companies, but maybe this is something that we can do. So this is the big agenda or whatever. But can we think about a mini campaign that is also a kind of short term to do this? A coordinating patent invalidation campaign. We know how to do it. We did it. We have been successful. Our opponents are everywhere, but we are also everywhere. It's the little opposition that happened have shaken the pharmaceutical companies. So I think we can do it. Can we commit to do it? I don't know. I leave the...
and to ask ourselves, since, 15 years ago. And what we say, I mean, we see it when we talk with governments. We see people starting to think, to question. We see them thirsty for ideas and alternatives. So I think it's important to see, think about what is it that we want, and then how do we want to achieve it, what is the strategy. And I'm done talking. So please go ahead. I think the elements will be put on the screen, but it's mostly for, to help remember what was said at the beginning of the session, and, so we don't lose the ideas. Whoever wants to, please.
It's working here, okay. So thank you, Othman, thank you, Loon, and thank you, everyone in the panel. I have that thing on my belly that moves, we were talking about the other day. And Betinho, which is, I think it's a great inspiration. He was a sociologist from Brazil that founded ABIA and other NGOs to fight injustice in Brazil. He has that, this sentence says, indignation is a symptom of life. And I think this is what really is at stake here. And to give some inputs here, I want to say again, because I think we have to repeat a lot of things so that they become normal. So no more patents for health technologies, patent-free world for health technologies. And as long as we keep saying that, more easy it is to listen to that. And we do have to speak that in these fancy forums. They have to listen to that. I've been in a public hearing in Brazil, and they say, this patent thing that is the innovation, this is lie. They don't have anything to back this up. And we have to say it, and we have to have the courage. And it's no shame to say it, because I truly believe it. And we do have to destroy the system, but I think we have to commit ourselves to fight each and every unjust monopoly that kills people today. So if we're going to play with the bone, let's throw the bone at them, and let's hurt them, at their core, and let's make them work, and let's they not sleep, and let's they worry about everything. If you go to the webpage of the Global Campaign to Dismantle Corporate Power, there's a video that says, the end of impunity is coming. And you have this big business person, throwing things at the floor, very angry because we are getting to them. And we are going to get there. But we have to destroy the system, and we have to fight monopolies. So just to remember an idea that Felipe had today, we have to have this permanent people's tribunal. This is a way to get justice. They're not going to jail, they're not going to waste their money, but they're going to be trialed, and they're going to be accountable for their human rights violation. If you have to ask fund for something, let's ask fund for making trials to hold those corporations accountable for their human rights violations. Thank you.
Jamie, please.
Thank you. I was really moved by the presentation about your breast cancer and what it's like to be a patient and be an advocate at the same time, and then have to deal with a situation, particularly in this situation that you're in. My wife was on Herceptin for several years. She was diagnosed in 2010. She's now on a follow-on drug, Gaelle, which is even less available than Herceptin is around the world. And the inequalities in cancer drugs are much starker than it is for HIV or hepatitis drugs today. And the cancer situation is more like the beginning of the social movement on HIV, instead of where HIV has made more progress, cancer has made almost no progress. So that's really, I think, a very important battle. In terms of cancer, one thing that's different, that's quite different about with HIV is that the supply of the biologic drugs can be a challenge. And the regulatory provisions and the lack of know-how and technology and trade secret information about manufacturing and access to materials is problematic. So one thing I think is important to do with complex molecules, not only for cancer but for other diseases as well, is to have a more affirmative request that there be technology transfer and access to materials at the time of registration for biologic products, because they don't really become as competitive even when the patents disappear. Another thing is that these new CAR T and cell-based treatments that are remarkable things that are now beginning to go from science fiction to reality have no plan for access in developing countries. And there's a vertical integration by the patent owner down to the doctor in the hospital where you're treated, which doesn't even exist for drugs right now. And those are procedures. Those aren't even really products. The product is, in some cases, your own body, your own T cells, which are modified and put back in your own body. And I think it's important for people to draw the line on how far patents can extend to patenting your own body, so you're not owned by a particular company based upon the therapy that you need. In terms of getting rid of the problem of high prices, ultimately, I mean, high prices are the incentive that generates billions of dollars of private investment. And efforts to get rid of that has to involve, as I mentioned the other day, it has to involve replacing that incentive with new incentives. And that has to be not just a vague, there are alternatives conversation. It has to, you can't replace something with 1,000 things. You have to replace something with something. And you have to have a narrowing of the agenda of what the replacements are. And you need things like feasibility studies, which are not very expensive, but they have to be done by governments and people that have kind of establishment credentials. And so a lot of the important work in that right now is to build the concrete alternative incentive systems that would replace and get rid of completely the idea of the grant of the monopoly and the high prices. Because you will not replace the current system with nothing. It has to be replaced with something, and that something can't be 1,000 different points of light. It has to be something that you develop a closer consensus on where you're going to go. And in that sense, the transparency agenda on research and development costs is important because it's the kind of information you need to model and design alternative incentives. You have to have real information, not just propaganda, on the cost of research and development. So we're very supportive of those kind of issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimmy. Ellen, please.
Hello? Yeah, does it work? Okay, thank you very much for all of your presentations, but particularly those of you who shared personal stories. It brought back many memories, and it also made me realize that in sort of designing the next wave of strategies, that it's very important that we look back at what has worked in HIV. What can we take on? Where did we perhaps go wrong in designing follow-on strategies? And I would like to make one very concrete proposal, because one of the aspects that we had with HIV, and at the time I worked for Médecins Sans Frontières, very much known now for pioneering HIV treatment in very difficult situations, but that was not a given. It was very difficult to persuade MSF to do that. And I would like to suggest that this group and these communities put a demand towards MSF to say, look, we now have new cancer drugs. They're put on the WHO essential medicines list. What are you doing to make sure that those drugs can be used in settings where they are currently not available? So to add to the political advocacy and strategy very practical aspects that show it can be done. I think that that is a very important element. The second is that that will also open the door to further international solidarity. Access to cancer treatment has become a global issue. We saw the pictures you showed from the demonstrations. We also have those demonstrations now in the UK and in Amsterdam and in Barcelona, which gives new opportunities. We now have European ministers of health talking about compulsory licensing for cancer drugs. That's absolutely unthinkable. They're a little late catching up, but it shows that there is a window for much more radical change than, say, five years ago. Very practical. I think we need to link the NCD, the non-communicable disease agenda, which is a very odd term, to treatment. If you look at what at the international level is said about non-communicable diseases, it's all about prevention, it's all about your lifestyle, it's your mistake if you get cancer, it's you eat too much, that's why you get diabetes. And there's actually very little about treatment. So again, this is probably the dinosaur in me, but it resonates with things that we've seen in the past and that we've developed responses for. And third, my third point is that it is really important to you increase the chances of success when you can actually put alternatives on the table. It is much easier, as long as I'm not saying it's easy, but it is much easier to campaign for something than against something. So I would like to echo what Jamie just said. If we want to replace the monopoly-based innovation system, we also have to engage in developing proposals as to what the alternative would look like. Thank you.
Khalil, please.
So I have 2 points. The first is about the agenda for, or the campaigns for an R&D treaty or for a reform of TRIPS, or even trying to get the new WHO DG to push for a more ambitious agenda on access to medicines. About that, you're asking, Gaelle, that we put suggestions about, an activist agenda, what things you would like to do differently in the next few years. One thing I would like to do differently is about WHO, about all multilateral negotiations, is to not expose ourselves so much to being taken hostage by the United States or a few countries that are pushing such a strong big pharma line in a multilateral negotiation where they end up blocking anything that we really like. And I guess what I'm suggesting is, can we try and create a vanguard of member states, of governments that are willing to push the envelope and to not just try and negotiate with the US to shift or with the other similar countries. So to have a progressive agenda that wouldn't be unanimous, that would be with a subset of countries that we would actually could get somewhere. And the second thing is, my second point is, besides our usual advocacy agenda, trying to go to governments, trying to make them understand how they need to have better laws, better treaties and stuff, how can we get organized as activists to try and take matters in our own hands more? What can we do more to make sure that the drugs that we need are manufactured as cheap, generic or follow-on versions faster, and that we can actually ship them to patients where they need. Can we engineer better buyers clubs for ourselves, for example? Shouldn't that be part of our agenda in the next few years? On top of asking governments to do stuff for us or to improve policies, how can we take things into our own hands better?
Joe, we're going back to this mic.
Good morning, I'm Everlow from Malaysia, and Positive Malaysian Treatment Access and Advocacy Groups, and I'm TAP Plus. So basically, I'm people living with HIV for 20 years, and I have families and with 2 kids are very healthy. So the purpose of this global summits, and since many people talk about is how to knock out this dinosaur for these summits, and so in this long journey, I think I've been hearing about this issue for about 15 years, and there's some works on this patent oppositions. It happens, but the issue that it will come back with second patentabilities, and also it's not easy. We fight for this CL, but CL just wouldn't last for long. See, maybe for Malaysia just valid for 3 years, some country valid for until patent expire and so on. So my point is that how we strategize to knock out the dinosaur. See, so the thing is, somebody has been taught what they call the ideology. What kind of ideology to develop a new system For instance, there's some thought about the human right. If there's a human right, of course, some party ignoring the human rights. You see, some are thought that change ideologies like socialism and so on. So, and the question is how going to think that to develop the strategy for anti-liberalization. So, for instance, let's talk about the system and reform at WHO, some new government and so on. This we need to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that we have been giving a lot of credits, maybe too much credits, to some of the pharmaceutical company strategies, including their voluntary license and also the way they try to rationalize the voluntary license. While this voluntary license, there are market strategies. There are market strategies from these pharmaceutical companies. In the same idea, I think we should stop using the World Bank classifications for countries because they don't reflect the inequalities in countries. They don't reflect the number of poor people in countries. They don't reflect the inequalities and in the access to care. For instance, when you see that in the US people don't have access to treatments, the same in the UK and so on, you see clearly that we can't use forever this World Bank classification. And I think it has been probably one of our, I would say, mistake as civil society organizations to completely interiorize this rationalization of pharmaceutical companies' strategies. Thank you.
So I just want to talk about a strategy that I've watched working really very well. I used to work for this feminist organization called Sakshi, and they launched a judicial sensitization program on violence against women and sexuality. We saw marital rape knocked off in Nepal. We saw many, many changes in the Indian judicial system as well. These were judges who were trained by an organization on gender and violence. And my request to South Center and other organizations is a lot of emphasis goes into training examiners. But you often forget, and then what you said, which court do we go to? I think we need to think of a program where we actually sensitize and train judges on IP and access to medicines. And they will become the protectors of our rights. And I strongly believe in that program because I saw its impact across South Asia. So I think we could do that. And number two, we need patent examination guidelines for biologicals, for vaccines, biological medicines, to guide patent offices as we've done for traditional pharmaceuticals. Every day, the Indian Patent Office grants patents on biologicals and makes mistakes, provides very weak patent protection. So if UNCTAD, UNDP, and others experts could develop a public health guide for patent examination for biological medicines and vaccines, perhaps we wouldn't have so many patent barriers to the drugs and vaccines we need. Thank you.
We move back to the other mic.
Merci, je m'appelle Safiatou, je suis originaire du Burkina Faso, mais je suis aussi suisse et je vis à Genève, je dirige, je le sais, qui travaille avec les pays de l'OAPI. Alors, je ne vais pas poser des questions, mais plutôt des remarques ou un complément par rapport à ce qui a été dit. Alors, pour moi, en fait, l'accès aux médicaments devrait être l'accès à tous les médicaments, parce que je me rends compte qu'on a beaucoup mis l'accent, par exemple, en Afrique subsaharienne, sur le sida, sur la malaria, mais on ne met pas l'accent sur les maladies négligées, le cancer. J'ai une sœur qui est doctoresse, elle me dit, Safi, je ne peux pas m'occuper de mes patients qui sont atteints de cancer, je dois juste les accompagner pour mourir. Et même pour les accompagner pour mourir, ils doivent pouvoir mourir dans la dignité, mais pas dans la souffrance. Pourquoi on doit dire que certains médicaments sont vendables, sont peuvent avoir des fonds pour pouvoir travailler et pas les autres médicaments. On devrait pouvoir travailler sur tous les médicaments parce que tous les malades méritent d'être soignés. Alors, ensuite, je veux parler des questions de responsabilité. Les gouvernements africains, notamment de l'Afrique subsaharienne, et les organisations telles que l'OMP ou l'OMS doivent prendre leurs responsabilités, dans le sens qu'on doit arrêter aussi les organisations qui financent les médicaments. Parce qu'en fait, quand les pays reçoivent des médicaments, ils ne savent pas comment est-ce qu'ils reçoivent les médicaments. Ils ne savent pas que la propriété intellectuelle a un impact sur l'accès aux médicaments parce qu'ils reçoivent tout et tout est facile. Il faut qu'on fasse de telle sorte que ces responsables politiques répondent devant leur population, devant leurs malades qui ne peuvent pas avoir accès à ces médicaments. Pourquoi l'OMS? Parce que l'OMS donne des séminaires dans ces pays-là et on continue de leur dire oui, on va vous aider à avoir l'accès aux médicaments. Mais comment? Comment? On doit leur dire la vérité. Et l'OMP, pourquoi? Parce que l'OMP donne des séminaires aux personnes qui travaillent à l'OAPI, mais aussi leur donne beaucoup d'argent et faire en sorte qu'ils ne se posent pas la question comment est-ce que nous devons organiser notre loi de façon à pouvoir permettre l'accès aux médicaments dans nos pays. Donc, la cible, ce n'est pas seulement l'OMS, mais aussi l'OMP. Pour que l'OMP arrête, par exemple, les flexibilités de l'accord ATPIC sont dans une base de données de l'OMP et l'OMP dit voilà, les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne, on a toutes les flexibilités, nous vous les enseignons et vous pouvez vous débrouiller avec pour promouvoir l'accès aux médicaments. Mais en même temps, ils leur disent oui, donnez plus de brevets, c'est ça qui va faire que vous allez vous développer. Mais ce n'est pas vrai, ce n'est pas vrai. Ensuite, ce que je veux dire aussi est que je suis très nouvelle dans cette bataille pour l'accès aux médicaments, mais je me rends compte que c'est toujours les mêmes personnes, toujours les mêmes têtes que je vois. J'aimerais voir plus de sociétés civiles de l'Afrique francophone ici qui puissent s'exprimer et qui puissent aussi avoir l'expertise pour challenger leur gouvernement, pour challenger ceux qui sont responsables de promouvoir l'accès aux médicaments. Et pour ça, il faut plus de partage entre la société civile du Nord et du Sud, du Sud et du Sud. Et ensuite, pour finir, j'aimerais, on va dire, avoir une stratégie globale de la société civile sur l'accès aux médicaments. Parce que... je vais dire quelque chose qui n'est peut-être pas confortable pour tout le monde, mais j'ai l'impression en fait que la société civile qui travaille dans la propriété intellectuelle et l'accès aux médicaments, chacun se bat pour son propre pain, alors que nous nous battons pour une justice sociale, nous nous battons pour quelque chose de noble. Pourquoi nous devons nous battre entre nous pour avoir la couverture pour soi? Ça me dérange beaucoup. Alors si aujourd'hui nous sommes capables de définir une stratégie commune en travaillant ensemble, main dans la main, pour parvenir à un accès équitable pour tous, oui, ça me plaît. Mais je ne veux pas avoir une société civile qui dit qu'elle veut promouvoir l'accès aux médicaments et se tirer les balles dans les pieds. Merci.
Merci. On passe de l'autre côté. En gros, il nous reste un quart d'heure pour finir cette discussion. Donc, je vous propose qu'on a encore un certain nombre d'interventions de la salle et puis on redonnera la parole aux speakers pour qu'ils puissent réagir.
Merci. May I switch to Spanish or you prefer English? Okay. Spanish. Yo quiero decir que me siento muy a gusto en que surja la propuesta de un mundo sin patentes para medicamentos y esa es una distinción para subrayar. Es algo que hemos venido diciendo hace muchos años. No voy a insistir en los argumentos con respecto a derechos humanos en contra de las patentes. Creo que tenemos suficiente ilustración sobre ese tema. Quiero aportar 2 o 3 elementos adicionales que me parece que le dan más fuerza a esta propuesta, a este lema de un mundo sin patentes farmacéuticas, un mundo sin patentes para medicamentos. El primero es un argumento histórico. Yo vengo de un país que fue colonia de España, el imperio más largo de la historia de la humanidad que se conozca, y estamos en un país que fue colonia, y les quiero recordar que el elemento económico fundamental del colonialismo fueron los monopolios. Gandhi marchó contra el monopolio de la sal y de las telas, y todos los países hicimos guerras de independencia en contra de los monopolios que garantizaban que el dinero se fuera de la colonia al centro. Y ese es el segundo elemento que les quiero recordar. La Organización Mundial del Comercio ha sido creada para liberalizar el comercio, pero varios trabajos, especialmente hechos por el PNUD y por otras organizaciones, por el UNDP, muestran que el comercio que funciona con libertad es el comercio entre las grandes potencias, no el comercio de los países pobres y los países ricos. Y hay una enorme cantidad de reglas de relación económica que finalmente lo que hacen es trasladar recursos del sur hacia el norte. Propiedad intelectual es uno de los mecanismos y es uno de los tratados, pero todo lo que existe sobre los tratados de protección de inversiones, que no son protección de inversiones del sur en el norte, los dineros del sur se van a las cuentas protegidas en los paraísos fiscales, que es otro problema internacional. Les quiero comentar una historia que hemos discutido mucho en Colombia a propósito de una intervención de un buen amigo nuestro sobre los detalles legales de la propiedad intelectual. Él dijo, y voy a cuidarme mucho de que lo digan bien en la traducción, o les voy a pedir que sean muy juiciosos en la traducción. Él dijo una frase que ahora la estamos usando en nuestras reuniones siempre al inicio. Dice algo así: algún día recordaremos las patentes de los medicamentos con la misma condena moral que hoy recordamos la esclavitud. Un par de argumentos adicionales de tipo estrictamente técnico. En alguna reunión sobre los criterios de patentabilidad, alguien hizo una pregunta inteligente. ¿Es industrialmente aplicable industrial un medicamento que no ha sido evaluado y no se sabe si tiene seguridad y eficacia y por lo tanto no tiene registro sanitario? Y la respuesta es que no es aplicable industrialmente, pero las patentes se conceden antes de solicitar el registro sanitario. La otra pregunta técnica: alguien decente, alguien honesto, un investigador honesto puede decir que el desarrollo de un medicamento es su invento o es siempre el resultado de una enorme cantidad de grupos de trabajo científicos. Y eso me lleva al último comentario, ya estamos bastante largos, porque yo creo que lo que necesitamos no es reemplazar este sistema de propiedad intelectual para promover la innovación. La propiedad intelectual no promueve la innovación, secuestra el dinero proveniente de la innovación, apropia el dinero de la innovación, pero la innovación está en las universidades, está en los grupos de investigación que no son los que dirigen las empresas farmacéuticas que están defendiendo este modelo. Y aunque yo comparto por completo la sensibilidad de todos ustedes ante las situaciones de personas que necesitan un medicamento concreto, les quiero decir que la innovación más importante que he visto en mi vida, que ya es un poco larga, de médico fue el abandono de la hidratación parenteral a los niños para ser reemplazada por la hidratación oral, que tiene un costo de 50 centavos de dólar por tratamiento. Yo vi morir muchos niños por deshidratación en Colombia y en otros países. Y esa mortalidad por deshidratación bajó a la mitad con una intervención de 50 centavos de dólar, en mi opinión, la que más vidas ha salvado en el siglo pasado. Y costó 50 centavos de dólar y fue una buena idea extraída de casa. Tenemos que regresar a ese debate de innovación en salud pública y a regresar a los grupos que hacen investigación, no a los que se apropian de la investigación mediante la propiedad intelectual. That's it.
Tracy, please, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to try to be brief because we're going to have our break soon. So.
I will be anyway. Hello, colleagues, friends, and comrades. We're about to get handed an extremely powerful weapon. In a few weeks, I think, the Andrew Hill article on the cost to produce every single medicine on the essential medicines list will be published. And from all the hepatitis C work, I think the thing that really reached everyone was saying, why is Gilead charging $1,000 a pill for something that costs less than $1 to produce? We are going to have so much great information for this fight.
Yeah, sorry. So I think it's sort of building on some of the recommendations that have been made by Anele and Chase and Gaelle and Jamie. We need to identify the group of countries that are most supportive of R&D and IP reform, firstly, but then create a coalition of civil society advocates in those countries, united around a common declaration, for example, that links in each of these countries. And the focus of the coalition will be to coordinate advocacy and clear, strong policies and proposals for those governments or political parties in those countries that are supportive. For example, we're doing that with the Labour Party in the UK. To work together to do two things. The first one, to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of our current R&D system compared to alternative innovation incentives. And then secondly, to implement a pilot of de-linked R&D model structured around alternative public health-focused innovation incentives. So I think that would be a really good step forward, and I would be eager to link together with other countries that would be supportive of that and civil society there. The second thing, and I mentioned this yesterday, and building on the important focus on the WHO, but we need to really have a focus on coordinating civil society agendas and engagement across all multilaterals that have an influence on access to, or could have an influence on access to medicines. The WHO, of course, but the Global Fund, we mentioned, UNITAID, UNAIDS, UNDP, and many others. So let's try and bring those together. Thanks.
Okay. I want to say thank you because I want to be appreciated for these few words. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Paul, and I work in DNP Plus, the Delhi Network of Positive People, and I am currently the president. And before I put my question, I want to tell all the audience that not only the panelists, but the funder, whoever, I want to say that DNP from its humble beginning, we have been doing what we can do for our community, the PLHIV community, in access to free treatment, whether it be HIV or TB or hepatitis C. And DNP has records of not writing any proposal up to date to fund us. What we do is we are committed for our community. And every month we are going to court fighting against Gilead or fighting against post-gun, pre-gun or whatever, or legal battle, many things. And every day we are monitoring the stock of drug diagnostic, everything. And such is the work, how we are committed to our community. I want to put this question, that's why I was talking about it. Okay, if DNP had been doing such thing, though we are not crying for funding or just being appreciated, at the end of the day, what I think is that people sitting in Geneva or any funder, do you think about this civil society who play a vital role, how to build the capacity, how to support them? That is my question, the people sitting in Geneva or any funder. Because in the last 1 year, I realized with the funding of UNITAID, the work we have been doing within 1 year was tremendous. So my question is that if such is the case, if civil society, PLHIV community, if funder or people sitting in Geneva, if they can support them, or at least tell to them, Paul, how are you doing? How are you doing? DNP, how are you doing? How can we help you? No, we don't want any funding. At least a moral support, something like that. And my last question is that people who are playing a vital role, they should be in one way or another, should be given moral support, any technical support, whatever. So how to build your capacity, please think about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to, as an HIV specialist physician, speak a moment about building coalitions and the narrative, innovative narratives, particularly for funders. What we see in Botswana now is mortality from cancer has overtaken mortality for tuberculosis in HIV patients. The reason Botswana we did extensive economic analysis to show that going to DTG and treat all, we had to do it. If we didn't do it, we were not going to win the battle. It made economic sense, and it was the only way we were going to be able to get a handle on the epidemic. Right now, what we're seeing in HIV population is a massive rise in NCDs. It's not a separate narrative. It's the same narrative. It's about health and human rights. And I can tell you the prognosis for a cancer patient in Botswana is much worse right now than an HIV patient. So I think we really have to be able to see this collectively, to build coalitions, to not say cancer's here, NCDs are here, but actually it's about health and human rights. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Chalam Sak from Bangkok, Thailand. Based on my experience working on assistive medicine for over 10 years, I have seen that we are fighting for drugs by drugs. And we have, it seems like a never-ending battle at all. Like in Thailand, we're fighting for first line regimen ARV, and then second line, and now we are fighting for the third line, and also HCV DAAs. I have a question for myself as well, that how we can end the battle, how we can win the battle. And the answer is like, have to look at the root cause of this problem. The IP is the root cause of problem that make the people can access to those medicine. And it's very expensive because of the IP. So I had a question back to WTO as well, because TRIPS agreement has been happened in 1995, and now 20 years have been passed, and have seen many evidence happen right now that million and million people cannot access to that medicine at all. So by the principle for the IP, they try to balance between the rights of the inventor who think about or invent a new medicine. But on the other hand, we have to look at the lives of people as well. But it seems like they have has imbalance because they're focusing on the benefits of the inventor. In another name is the multinational drug company. So I had a question to the WTO as well. They had to look back the evil that had created 23 years ago. They have to look at it and reveal what's wrong with that, and they have to change the system. because it doesn't work at all. It's not respond the need of people that don't claim all the time that's going to create an innovation on the pharmaceutical, but it is not that's true. And the other party that I would like to mention is about WHO, because it's the mandate of this organization to take care of health of the people of the world. But when Thailand announced to use this compulsory licensing 10 years ago, no one's come to help us at all from the WHO. They came too really late to our country to monitor or even had access what's going on. But it's happened after Thailand has been bombarded by the US, by the EU government, or even the multi-drugs company. They sent a letter to the Indian drug company that you shall not supply the medicine to Thailand, because Thailand is a thief. They stole the medicine from them. So what WHO doing at the time? I had a question, but it's only civil society and friends from the international NGO help us, help the Thai government to stand firm that you're doing the good thing for the people. So I think the job of the WHO is not just like have the regulations that how good or how safety the medicine is, but have to look at the other hand as well about the IP, that how had effect to the lives of people, because it's too expensive and no one can afford to buy it, or even the government to prescribe that medicine to the people. And the last point that I would like to mention is it seems like civil society is step behind the multinational drug company all the time, one step behind. I'm talking about this because I'm thinking about when Thailand used the compulsory licensing, the VL or voluntary licensing is happening. It's trying to fix the broken thing that they have created. But in my point of view, I have seen voluntary licensing is another kind of monopoly, like a Thailand on the Czechoslovakia, for example. We have not included in the territories list before. But the other country, they can import the cheaper generic from India under the VL. So it's like I had a question to the generic manufacturer as well. What is your principle? Or even to the Gilead as well. What is the principle to select what country are supposed to get the benefit from this medicine? So it's like they are joint hand together between generic manufacturer and also originator that company as well. Join hand to create another kind of monopoly. So I think this is not the way, not the wise way at all to address the access to medicine in the long term. So that's my point. Thank you.
Alma de León de ITPC para América Latina y el Caribe. Creo que hemos escuchado bastante de patentes y bastante, pues ya no quiero ahondar más en el tema, y también voy a hablar en español, dado que tenemos la diversidad de los idiomas. Creo que las medidas que debemos de tomar van a plazo. Abolir patentes creo que es un grueso muy grande que involucra muchas cosas y mucha productividad, y con lo que tendríamos mucha batalla. Pero sí podemos hablar del tema de abolir patentes. Tengo un colega que escribió un libro y dice que las patentes, crimen de lesa humanidad, y creo totalmente en eso. Creo que nosotros las patentes que sí debemos abolir son las patentes de los medicamentos, y aquí quiero referirme, aunque soy una persona con VIH por muchos años, creo que los medicamentos tampoco nosotros debemos de ser excluyentes con otras infecciones o otras enfermedades, porque un día las personas con VIH también van a tener tuberculosis, también hepatitis C y también cáncer y otras más. Entonces, lo que a mí me parece es, el comercio está bien, pero no para la salud. Las patentes que deben de abolirse son las patentes de los medicamentos y, por supuesto y sobre todo, esos medicamentos que salvan vidas. Desde el 2015, en el Foro Social de Derechos Humanos, se hizo un capítulo especial y una reunión especial, la 26 y 28, y ahí se habló toda la reunión sobre la ruta que debía llevarse para darle una salida al tema de propiedad intelectual. Creo que esas resoluciones, esas recomendaciones no se han abordado, no se han seguido y es un tema que se debe de llevar a Naciones Unidas. También se nos ha olvidado como activistas, ya se dijo que las personas diagnosticadas tienen que tener tratamiento primero para salvaguardar su vida y luego para mitigar nuevas infecciones. Todos sabemos que apenas alcanzamos un 50% de tratamiento en VIH y estamos cómodamente tranquilos viendo cuándo los gobiernos van a pensar en abordar a todas las personas que necesitan tratamiento. Ya tuvimos muestras claras de demandas ante la Corte Internacional de Derechos Humanos por esto. Hay medidas cautelares, ejemplos de medidas cautelares por esas medidas en varios países y creo que es el momento de levantar también en tratamiento. Cuando todas estas personas entren a tratamiento, se va a necesitar más dinero en los gobiernos. Esos gobiernos que su primer artículo en casi todas las constituciones dice que es un mandato y una obligación el salvaguardar la vida. Es el primer derecho y la primera obligación de todo gobierno. Entonces, si la Organización Mundial de la Salud y de Comercio se ponen de acuerdo para poder salvaguardar esta vida, deberían entonces de entrar al tema y apoyo totalmente lo que decían el compañero de Brasil. Hay que hacer una demanda, entonces, para los gobiernos por el tratamiento que no está dando y a la industria por la violación de derecho en quitar la vida. Tenemos 35 millones de muertes. Solo el año pasado, en el 2017, 1 millón de muertes. Y eso se lo debemos a falta de presupuesto por todo el dinero concentrado en los monopolios de la industria. Gracias.
Hello. I think, like my colleague said, we should exploit this opportunity of Andrew Hill research. This is something we could do right now. This is an immediate thing we could do. I have some experience of raising awareness about the issues of intellectual property, and this research is a real opportunity for us to raise awareness. We need to have people outraged about the prices, about what they are paying for intellectual property. We need to have people say, we don't want to pay intellectual property anymore. This is the message. We don't want to pay intellectual property. Intellectual property is a tax. We don't want to pay this tax. It's like 100,000% tax. We don't want to pay it. And this is something we could do in the streets all over the world, the same day, the same week, in the next weeks. This is something we could do now. Now, for the strategy, I think the problem, I'll be quick. I think the problem is with, the question is why we don't just ignore intellectual property. Why is the black market not working for drugs? Okay. Somehow our poor and not effective administrations, especially in the third world country and the developing countries, work well for intellectual property. This is our problem. This is a concrete problem. And we need a way to paralyze all those administrations. The way to paralyze this is a big administration that goes from the big pharma to the frontier police in each of our governments. This is a hierarchy of administration. And to paralyze all these administrations, something we could do is, why not, amend the Declaration of Human Rights to introduce rights. This could be a first, to introduce rights for sharing knowledge and for using knowledge for all the humanity. this could paralyze all this administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to turn back to the speakers and thank them for accepting to be so silent as speakers and ask them to please have some quick reaction, yes, to what everything, what was coming from the room. Thank you very much.
First of all, I think it was a very rich discussion, and I think if I would need to summarize some key ideas that were very much repeated several times, one of them is a human right approach. A human right approach, and the contrary of a human right approach is a human right violation. This has been repeated several times. I think this is the main idea that we need to have when we are discussing access to medicines. In the second place, I think we have to move to a patent-free world. We have medical products out of patent, a shift from a broken system and monopolies to move to a patent-free world for pharmaceuticals. But what steps are necessary to reach that? I think we have to discuss strategies to reach that. We will not do that from one day to another. And the third issue that I would also highlight is to expand the scope from HIV, TB, malaria, hepatitis C. Cancer has been several times discussed, non-communicable diseases, and to think on people and not on diseases. Because the person that needs treatment not only for neglected tropical diseases. It's for cancer, it's for hypertension, it's for heart diseases. So I think we need to focus on people and not focus on the diseases. Those would be the main lessons that I would extract from here.
Well, I come with a certain level of humility because sometimes it's better to listen than to always talk. But I would say a couple of things. Perhaps this is showing that I'm a dinosaur, but when I first joined this movement, one of the things that I always found is that when you talked about access, people said, well, if you do anything about access, we won't have any new treatments. And there was always a paradox in that, because they were saying, well, something must be right about the system because you're fighting to get access to some drugs that were made from that system. So I think that one of the things that the movement has done is actually say that there is not a trade-off between access and innovation. You need both, but we need to find ways to do that. And the intellectual property system was supposed to be a solution to a problem, which is that basically we're talking about knowledge, and it's easy to copy knowledge, and people weren't prepared to invest in it if they thought that knowledge could be copied. But there used to be an old slide that Ellen did. This was a bad bargain, because the bargain for society was that if you gave people these monopolies, you would get the new medicines that you needed and at an accessible price. And we know from our own experience that that system hasn't really worked in NTDs and in DNDI. We've also had to review the fact that not only is it not possible to talk about different countries, but to talk about different diseases. So we're moving to talk about neglected populations rather than neglected diseases. But I think one of the challenges is if you want to have new medicines, and you don't have new medicines everywhere, but if you do, if you want to have new tools, you've got to think about ways to ensure that people are prepared to invest. And one of the things that I think that policymakers really struggle with is there a different way? We hear what you say, but is there a different way? And I think one of the things that we hope to bring as DNDI is some kind of reality check that there are different ways to do it, but it does require meeting the realities that R&D costs money, and that you also have to work with a variety of partners, including the big pharmaceutical companies. But you have to change the incentives that are given to them. If you give them an incentive that says you need to make the highest amount of money and focus on the most profitable diseases, it's no surprise that they do that. And as Loon said, this is not something that comes from nature. This is a system that's created by people, And I think we can show to policymakers and talk to policymakers that there is a different way to do this. And each of us have to play a different part. And we hope to bring some of the lessons and some of the challenges that we faced in trying to come up with an alternative way to try and help feed into some of these discussions.
Well, I think there had been a very, very rich discussion this morning, and I think that the organizers, they have a lot of good material to draft some conclusion of this meeting. I will insist in something that I say in my presentation. I think if we are talking about access to medicines, it will be important to identify what are the essential components, the essential elements of the access to medicine issue. That is important in order to target reality, what are the most important problems. The second thing I will repeat that will be important to target WHO and to give some credit to the new WHO with the element that Jorge already insists, that is not only the DG and the new administration, but is for the first time we have an ADG dealing with the, drugs and vaccines that is open to these kind of problems. And the final thing, here in the room we are many people that we were advocating in the last 10 years on the R&D treaty for pharmaceutical, and we failed simply because there wasn't a position from the US and the European Union. I am very, very surprised. I have been attending in the last 2 years in the Human Rights Council how is moving this treaty. It's incredible. You can't believe it. There are already several documents of reference. I think that you and WHO have to be present absolutely in the negotiation of the treaty of the human rights behavior that is a binding treaty that they are negotiating. The US, they excluded themselves. They are not even attending the meetings, and the meetings are one whole week every year. But the interesting thing is that the European Union that had been quite against is now divided, because the Nordic countries, when you talk about human rights, there are more sensitivity in Europe than in the US. So that the negotiation is going, in my opinion, quite fast. It's only 2 years, and they have already several agreements. So I think that we have to follow closely and to be involved in this binding treaty in the Human Rights Council.
As an affected person, hell, I am angry. I want us to be radical. My right to access to equal health care has been affected. My constitutional right to life has been affected. If I cannot have this treatment, it means I am forced to commit suicide under the name of dying with dignity. I am saying, let us challenge them. Let us be a pain in their asses. Let us approach the offices of public protectors in our small communities. Every time we have death, let us make them feel it. I am saying, let us challenge the media. The media must do a proper research and intensified research on these issues. Let us talk about it. I am saying, let us challenge the WHO. We cannot, IP also concerns morals. It's also an issue of progress. It's also an issue of healthcare. Why are they monopolizing this thing into profits only? Hell, I am angry. I want to be radical because I feel this pain every day. I live with this pain day and night, asking myself, when am I going to die? Because I don't have access to something that can give me hope and give me life. This is not an entitlement. This is my right. This is not as an issue of courtesy or mercy. This is my constitutional right.
Yes. Until and unless, if your opponent, if they sleep peacefully, that means they don't listen to you. So make them uncomfortable so that only then they address to our concern. As long as they sleep peacefully, they eat peacefully, they will not bother. But when we make them uncomfortable, that's the time they listen. So make them uncomfortable. That's what we have to do, as someone also rightly said. I want to respond to what Khalil has said about, while we were talking about this alternative ways, what about bettering the buyer system? Yeah, I just want to say that